Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our very snowy launch of the week of January 27th. It is Tuesday, January 27th. You're in Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs in the Vermont State House. And we have a packed agenda this week. Today is Tuesday, so we're going to be taking up housing. That's our schedule. We will be to meet our committee housing deadline of this Thursday. We, the sponsor of S305 and I have talked this weekend, and we've agreed to continue work on our committee housing bill. It includes a large number of additional pieces from both the administration and from her bill. We have worked really hard to avoid jurisdictional overlaps. There are some, obviously, but we've worked hard to avoid them. And so we're going to move forward in agreement. We're going to move forward on our committee housing bill that we reviewed briefly last week. The objective this week, today actually, is to walk through that, see what elements we are agreeable to, what we, we're going to have to hear a lot more about all of them. The plan is that we will agree to the basic elements, that we will then introduce it we'll vote probably on Thursday. It will be introduced on the floor of the Senate and sent back to us here to work on for the next bit until crossover. So that is the plan. But we thought we'd start today to frame up for us as we go into this discussion of housing and our housing crisis here in Vermont. We thought we would begin reviewing what is embedded in the governor's budget, so that we have a notion of the housing that's been taken care of, that has not been taken care of, but that has been addressed and included in the governor's budget. So for that, I'd like to welcome Ted Barnett, who is going to be from our Joint Fiscal Office, who's going to be our housing major duomo in the Joint Fiscal Office. Yes, so this is now going to be your bailiwick.
Exactly, it makes sense. So Ted Barnett, Joint Fiscal Office. After talking with Pat a bit about that.
Sorry, David.
Can you back up just a second?
Absolutely.
What did you say happens on Friday on the floor and then comes back to the committee?
So I don't know if it'll be Friday, but our what we're called to do and required to do for committee bills, as I told you, Kish and I talked, we're going to move forward with a committee housing bill. It has to be introduced and voted out of here at the kind of a draft by Thursday. I don't know if it will come back to us Friday or Tuesday, but one or the other it'll come back to us to work on. And
just housing, or you think?
And tomorrow we're going to do the same thing with Senate Economic Development, with an economic development bill. Thank you. Remind you. Ted. So we're going to begin, Keisha, with Ted giving us a notion of what is in the governor's budget as it relates to housing.
Sure. So yes, reflective of, I'm sure you all have heard, kind of floating around in the ether, the discussion that this budget cycle was a tight one. And I think reflective of that, the amount of housing investments, and to be clear, when I'm talking about housing investments, I'm not referring to emergency housing or related supports. There are only 3 items that I'm going to discuss with you all that were in the GovRec. So the first piece is making funding for the Vermont Housing Improvement Program, VHIP. Putting that as base funding, so there's $4 million in the GovRec for that. That reflects what was in the GovRec last year, but that funding was transitioned to one-time funding for VHIP by the time it was enacted in Act 27.
Is it all general fund?
It would be all, yes, it would all be funded by the.
Because 2 years ago, we created the additional property transfer tax.
Mm-hmm.
So did the governor make any comment on that?
So I will get to that when I talk about the property transfer tax.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So that'll be in the item after next.
But it's fair to say that one of the challenges with VHIP is it doesn't go through VHCB. which is the property. Most of the property.
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge or not, but I just didn't know if it's just in his budget.
Yeah.
Yes, so the second piece is,
And it's at the, sorry, it's 4 million.
4 million for rehab, correct. The second piece is for, the MHIR. Thank you very much. So that is,
Manufactured.
I just felt, but yeah, I shouldn't call them all. Where,
It's
so
the manufactured housing infrastructure program.
Mhm.
yes, that is correct. So that, there's a
Infrastructure and repair.
Sorry, the R.
$800,000 one-time appropriation. I will note that that is in addition to 2 million in base funding. That was in Act 27 last year for fiscal year 26. And
So
then
we've, sorry, that's just to note for people who don't fully take that on board, that's a major retreat.
Well,
I mean, it from base funding to one time.
no,
No,
in the base, 2 million in the base.
Oh, it's still in the base.
it
yeah.
would be, it would be,
Yeah. If he took it out of the base, I would be.
So, but I apologize, the way you presented it, I thought it meant that we were
Going back with one step, rehab, what was the amount?
$4 million.
short. So the 2 million in base funding continues.
Continue, it would be, yes.
Thank you.
That's just what that.
That's a good clarification.
Do they give you a sense, or I imagine maybe separately track the amount of their queue on VHIP, or you don't have that?
I don't have that. I would get testimony from
Okay.
PhD on that. So the final piece is the property transfer tax. One of my favorite pieces in the budget.
Yeah.
So so for fiscal year 27, there's $82 million in overall property transfer tax revenue. The piece that is allocated to the Housing and Conservation Trust Fund is $37.6 million. We'll note that there's the Housing and Conservation Trust Fund has their dual purpose. It's generally recognized that 60% of that overall funding would go to housing. So we're looking at about $22.6 million from that amount that's allocated to the trust fund in section D100. This reflects essentially the statutory calculation, right? As you take overall PPT revenue, you subtract off Department of Tax admin costs and the $2.5 million housing bond. And so the amount that's in the GovRec
And
for
no land use review board.
no land use review board, correct.
Okay.
So it reflects 50% of that remaining revenue, which is what is outlined in statute for the allocation of the PTT. This is what was made possible for the additional revenue put towards PTT.
And I'd like
From
to
the-
know if it's above forecast again, like it was the year before.
So it was downgraded in fiscal year 26. So in the BAA, there was a slight reduction in allocations
Okay.
because it was downgraded just a bit.
Yeah.
But it is in line, broadly speaking, with the estimates that were done for Act 1 and B1.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, and it was above forecast the first year.
Yes.
It went into
Yeah.
effect. So
Yeah.
you upgraded the forecast and then downgrade.
So now it's sort of level.
Yeah.
I do want to make sure you're going to tell everyone that we very often notwithstand the existing allocation framework and could give more to housing, for example, could change the amounts to go to various places in concert with the appropriation.
That would be a policy choice for y'all to decide how. It is not withstood in the budget. I would also note that there is also a piece that is, this is important for, I think you have an appropriation for municipal planning that you're considering in your committee bill.
Right.
So the piece, there's an allocation that goes to municipal and regional planning, and that part is not withstood
Okay.
in the GovRec. And it's reflective, the explanatory language in the GovRec notes that ACCD requested this notwithstand to reflect demand for planning grant for regional planning commission versus at the municipal level.
Oh,
So this is reflective of, it doesn't line up with what is in statute, but it reflects need on the ground.
so
according
I
to
think
what
there's
is-
municipal need on the ground.
Yeah,
So 50, so just for everybody else,
Yep.
else who's not quite as clear on the PPT.
yep,
Property transfer tax, the 50% So if immediately, unclear how much goes to tax for administration and to pay all the housing. That takes up X%, how much?
So it's
Our
that part is
82
not
million.
understood because tax doesn't use their full amount. So tax is about 600,000, and then the housing bond is 2.5
Is
million.
2.5, so it's
Yeah.
like 2.6, something like
And
that.
is everyone on this committee clear about how we raised the additional revenue on the property transfer tax 2 years ago? Because I'm about to have an op-ed out about it.
Why
So,
don't you remind everybody?
okay, so 2 years ago,
Right.
based on a proposal from the administration, from Craig Bolio, a tax commissioner at the time, he wanted to find a way to offer a tax benefit for blighted or underutilized properties, but not give that benefit to second homes or short-term rentals. So how would tax do that? They would look for a landlord certificate or a homestead declaration. So I used that concept to, is it 2.5 times or is it 3 times? The property transfer tax increase for a non-primary resident.
So the raise goes from 1.25 to 3.4%.
3.4, so a little under three times. So we almost tripled the rate for the property transfer tax if you are articulating that you will not be using it as a rental for longer than a month, or that you will be using it as your primary residence. If you do indeed do that, and you can produce those documents at the end of the year, you can get your additional payment back. We have heard very minor, kind of marginal case studies about how it might need to be tailored to work better. But it was above forecast. Its first year, if someone wants to say that they heard from somebody that this was, poorly administered or a hardship, please let me know. But it is the basis of the tax department's report for how they would go about an annual second home property tax.
Right, which is already in place and went into place in August, and we saw a huge flurry of sales.
The property transfer tax is in place,
The property
an annual
transfer tax is
property
in-
tax.
Correct. So for those who are interested in a more substantial tax for second homeowners, it has been in effect since August of 23.
24.
24.
So it would have gone to 24. Yep.
24. And we saw a flurry of, obviously, sales leading up through to July 31st. And then it sort of has leveled off, I think, and now.
Well, because the original forecast, I think, was anticipating there would be more hiccups, or just wasn't clear how many people would report second home use or short-term rental use. The forecast came in higher, or the amount came in higher than forecast.
We always like to be conservative in the amount
Exactly.
of revenue we forecast for you all.
But
Yes.
I think that's important because people worried then that folks would just try to game the system. And my takeaway is that people who know they have kind of something that's considered a luxury good, a home that's vacant for much of the year, or used as a short-term rental, generally did not try to game the system. We saw about as many property transfers as we would anticipate that were long-term vacant properties. And it was above forecast. The forecast got raised to reflect that most people are just paying this tax and happy to contribute to their community and more housing in the state.
So I remember this conversation, and there was concern that it might discourage flipping for attribute properties, but you opened up by saying that we somehow consider whether or not it's occupiable. And so if they buy a house that is not currently inhabitable, they can
Yes,
also
not
get-
fit for year-round habitation. So that's been a lot of interesting side cases that I just think are fascinating. It doesn't have potable water. It is intended to capture the deer camps, which we had that conversation in finance. And that's about 10% of vacant properties in the state. So you are not past that extra amount if it is not fit for year-round habitability.
Right. That was the key. But if you would be kind of just to finish on where all the little pieces of property transfer tax after you're taking off the top for the bond and for tax, and then 50% of what's left over goes to VHCB with a 60-40 split. The other percent goes to technical assistance, municipal and regional planning help, and what else?
So for the remaining portion, and I will, to help you all visualize this, I know it's hard to talk about numbers in the abstract. I will, we have a table that summarizes property transfer tax allocations in the GovRack, a little spreadsheet, but I'll send that to Kiara so she can put it up on the committee page.
Right.
But so you have the portion that is allocated to the trust fund, which is 50% after you take the housing bond and Department of Taxes costs off the top.
The
And
housing
then
trust fund.
the housing trust fund, correct? And then of that remaining amount, 13%, sorry, it used to be 17, goes to the municipal and regional planning and resilience fund. And within that fund, there are 3 separate uses: grants to regional planning commissions, grants to municipalities for planning purposes, and an amount that goes to BCGI for, since they assist municipal and regional planning commissions, lay out the land. So
And that adds up to 100%.
So, and then the remainder goes to the general fund. So the amount that's
roughly what at the moment?
that is, they are banking, hold on 1 second. It is roughly $31 million of property transfer tax revenue. If you include $1 million of the clean water surcharge, it's $32 million in general fund. From that combined revenue.
The general fund.
Yep, and nearly $10.2 million to municipal and regional planning.
Great. Okay, so, and in the governor's budget, he supported all those allocations this year. He didn't try and take any more for the stadium. Right?
This is
all.
This is reflective of the percentages that are in statute, with the caveat that tax didn't need their full percentage allocated, their 1.5%, and there's the housing bond involved.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you. And so, the significant difference here, there are 2 really significant differences. One is the movement of most of the Vermont VHIP programming to the base, which is exciting. It may not be enough money. We may want to consider more than that. But that's a great start. And as you may remember, last year, it also began on the base and was pulled. And it ended up being one-time money again. So I think one of the pieces I would encourage as we go through our committee housing bill is underscoring the fact that we want to keep that in the base and not have it yanked again. And then, of course, the other piece, which is very encouraging, is the additional $800,000 for the manufacturing public infrastructure and repair program. So that's great. Anything else? And that's it on housing.
Yes. That is as far as I was able to see in reviewing GovRack.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Terrific. Okay.
Which constitutes an end to some programs that we funded in past years, or the language accompanying that later on.
I'm sure the language lives. You're talking about things that were funded in 181.
Well, and other.
Yeah, and other housing bills. Yeah, I would have to review and see how those programs are funded, whether funding is continued, but in many cases, if the language isn't enshrined in statute, right, they would live on
Okay.
even without funding.
Okay.
Well, it's important to know that, obviously, so we know that folks coming to us at the last minute.
Sure, I will take a look and see. We have spreadsheets that take a wider look at housing investments over time, and I will take a look at those and see.
Right.
All right.
Terrific.
Mhm.
Well, the addition of the property transfer tax is terrific. And it's great that it's a little bit more level this year than hadn't been that great. So thank you. That's great. Any other questions for Ted? Any other thoughts going forward?
Not at the moment. I will have thoughts going
So
forward.
our total on housing at the moment in the governor's budget is
I could do, if you're including
4.8
the,
to, so 6.8 and 30. Well, anyway, whenever you get it.
Okay.
That's great. Sure. Terrific. Thank you very much. And Kim and Ellen are coming. Yep. Are they? Okay, so
Madam
now.
Chair, would you like me to stick around for committee discussion or?
I think we are probably in good shape.
Okay.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate your joining us. Thomas, what do you think?
Since we have a minute,
Yeah, we have a minute because Cam and Ellen are not.
do you recall a time when we didn't notwithstand the statutorial obligation to the VHCV? It seems like we just every year since we had it in place, are we notwithstanding the entire allocation to the VHCV, or are we fortunately adjusting that?
Oh, man, we have for most of my years not funded it 100%.
If you notwithstand it all, it's the entire.
And I think, yeah, it's a good question. As far as time immemorial, as far as I understand, property transfer tax allocations have been notwithstood. I think part of in the budget this year now, even though the ending percentages reflect what is in statute, since tax doesn't need their full allocation, since there are changes in the municipal and regional planning resilience funds, since those are the allocations in there don't reflect statutory percentages. It's you just notwithstand the whole thing and then put those allocations in, even though the underlying allocations at a broad level between the Housing and Conservation Trust Fund, the General Fund, and the Municipal and Regional Planning Fund are reflective of statute, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, we just keep notwithstanding and then doing whatever we want, but that's okay, because we can do that.
I was happy to do whatever we want.
I think that's a bit much, but it is encouraging that for the last couple of years, we have 100% funded VHC. We have not done in my lifetime, in that
That's right.
Keisha and I, we have fought almost every year to try and get VHCB funded 100%
Right.
of what they are, what's due to them. And it has really, literally the last 3 years, they've gotten 100% of
Right.
what it's.
And I don't want to speak for Senator Kitchell, who will probably be visiting us next week. But she usually did not like people coming with an appropriation request that also had an accompanying tax proposal, if you recall. But she saw a lot of value in connecting second home and ownership and vacancy to adding more money for affordable housing.
I guess I have a question, not for now, but how you determine the amount that you, the VHCP, so you said 100% what there's, that's the question.
Well, there's a statutory construct for that.
Yes, in statute, there.
Sorry, can you close the door, please, whoever last came in?
Yeah, in statute, there are specific allocations of property transfer tax revenue, and that is 50% of the remainder after taxes, admin costs, and after the housing bond. 50% of that revenue from the property transfer tax should go to the Housing and Conservation Trust Fund, and the amount in the governor's recommended budget is at that 50%. So
And
that, yeah.
Relatively new, because for many years it was less, and we'd have to fight to take it back up.
Okay, thank you.
Great,
Great.
thank you so much.
Of
This
course.
is terrific, and more to follow. And I think we are going to. How would you two like? We're going to, as you've heard, move forward with our committee housing bill, which has a number of elements in it. I think today what it would be very helpful for us to do is go just walk through, because we're gonna have to sign off on it and vote it out as a draft basically on Thursday. So what would be helpful, I think, is for us to review the pieces of it and okay them, not okay them. Obviously the only for the conversation, because this is just the beginning of this work. But this is just to remind you, this includes the housing pieces from Keisha's bill, the housing pieces from the administration's bill, a few requests we have gotten directly. We can entertain more pieces being added. One piece that is missing, which is my bad, is Commissioner Farrell's design,
Municipal by right,
municipal,
which we tried to do, but.
right, design by right. Ellen's gonna speak to us about how we use by right. I'm not sure that's the right term for us to use, but anyway, that whole proposal
Yeah,
is one that is missing, and that's apologies to Alex. And there may be some pieces from the Let's Build Homes that we could include that are housing and not, don't tread on the toes of SNRE. Okay, we have lived through the challenges of the jurisdictional battle, and I think we've really tried to really tread it thoughtfully in incorporating elements in this bill, and we'll go through them and to discuss them further. The one piece that I think leadership in both the House and the Senate, we're hoping that the chip proposals will wait. Any changes to chip will wait until next year, just because it is just big much. And I think many of us, just as we held off on Act 250 last year, I think everybody, we feel that chip needs a year to get to stand up on its own feet before we do too much interfering. We'll see what happens, but that's the hope. So with that, Ellen and Cam, do you want to come and do this together?
Regarding chip, wasn't there some language that needs to be modified to clarify, across the street? There's something about infrastructure being not.
that's Home Act.
That's the Home Act.
I do,
And
I
we have
did,
language.
I mean, so as I, support the chair's good work to try and pull something together and be, diplomatic about our jurisdiction. Even if something doesn't land in this bill, I think there are probably by next week, there are things that would be worth understanding what we're foregoing if it comes back up, and because I have a different feeling about letting this program work.
Chip we're talking about.
Yeah, about that. I think we will spend the next year hearing from people about projects that get hung up. And I just want to make sure we take an affirmative stance to ignore or listen to those concerns in advance.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And we'll have Jessica in and we will discuss those fully. And I see Corey's in the room too. So how would you two like to proceed? Because I think what we want to do, given that we have an hour and a half, or roughly, is really go through it, at least understand what's in it at the moment. And then agree if we want to add anything to it, add things. But I think what we want to do is at least have a good understanding of what is in this draft so that we can sign off on it. It'll get voted out on Thursday, go to the floor, and then get sent back to us for work.
Let's start with page one. Just walk through it that way.
I think that's the simplest way to do it.
So Ellen Checkhouse, legislative council. So we did this on Friday.
Yes, I
And
know,
we did it.
but
So you are gonna do markup?
I think that is
Is that
the
what
thought. Well,
Okay.
a very high level markup, because we're going to dive into it beginning next week.
Okay. So if you want to start with page one, then.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Cam, why don't you start us? And if you're seeing something that's missing, we've included the meter request, which that's in pretty good shape at the moment. I think there was something else. And the only thing that I know of that's missing at the moment is Alex Farrell's proposal. So, yeah,
This is
Dave,
drafting request 260748.
at the moment, that's right.
Okay, thank you.
And so the public who are listening along, it's on our website, and it's on our website.
We're using 1.1.
Yes.
We're on 1.1, and what I assume will be introduced will be 1.2 or 3.
Very good.
Yeah, and I think we don't have. I think the objective here is to include what we want to have further discussion on. We may not end up in agreement on all of these pieces, but at least what's worthy of further discussion is, I think, is that okay? It's a run. I apologize. This is not the way we normally do business, but hey, we're being asked to do it this way, and I figure do the best we can do. So, thank you all for your indulgence in this.
All right. Good morning. For the record, Cameron Wood, Office of Legislative Counsel. So as you can see, we have draft request 260748. Believe you all have it. We went through this relatively quickly this past Friday morning. It has a draft request number because, you know, it obviously has not been introduced at this point. Madam Chair, I think you're working to try to get something introduced and referred back to you so you continue to work on it, as you just mentioned briefly a minute ago. So you will see it doesn't have a subject, doesn't have a purpose statement, doesn't have a title yet, because trying to figure out exactly what will be in the bill before it gets introduced. So that way we can ensure that those pieces of information accurately reflect what's in the bill. So that will obviously be filled out by our office before it gets introduced. As I mentioned last Friday, a lot of these sections have been, you know, pulled out from other bills that were introduced and incorporated. So whereas it's probably in a near final state from an editing perspective, it needs to go back to our editors one more time. So that's why it has a watermark of unedited draft on it.
No, very helpful.
Okay.
And just to remind everybody, this has the administration's pieces. This has the Act 69 report and recommendations. This has the VETA recommendations. This has Keisha Ron Hinsdale's 305 housing pieces. So in all cases, we have tried to include things that were strictly pretty much housing. Okay.
Well, I'm not jumping on with this first section. I had a question about a municipal plan. Is that appropriate now?
Jump in.
All right. So I'm used to the term comprehensive plan. Is that effectively the same thing in your terminology? How would a municipal plan be different than what I understand towns, certain areas develop every 5 or 10 years, a comprehensive plan?
This area is new to me, so I may not be able to answer that question directly. Ellen may be able to answer it.
And I think as we go through, we want to also identify the witnesses for this. I believe this is from the Department of Housing and Community Development. This is an administration proposal, and so we want to hear more from them on it.
But relatedly, before you
Yeah.
speak, Ellen, I just want to make, I think this is the case, but before the VLCT reaches out, I want to know that this doesn't force them to update in real time, but this would just be part of the next standard cycle that they would be, when they take this on, they would just have to incorporate this in their lens.
Ellen Tchaikovsky, Office of Legislative Counsel. I've never heard them referred to as comprehensive plans, but perhaps South Burlington does have a lot going on, so it could incorporate other things. But yes, this is part of the municipal planning statute, so probably. The cycle is every 8 years for them to expire and then re-adopt. They can adopt them more frequently than that if they seek to make if they seek to make changes. I think I don't know if the language in here requires them to update it more frequently, but usually when you're updating the requirements for the municipal plan, it would be as part of the next update cycle. Yeah.
This language to you tracks with that. That this isn't putting something.
You could make it clear if you would like it to be.
We can clarify
I
that.
hate to have them drop everything and have to address this, but I trust your language in that.
But I think this is meant for long-term, what additional to include. So, but we will get clarity from the administration, from Alex and whoever in the administration proposes.
And just to jump in there, I mean, it's not required now, so it doesn't have a retroactive effect. So we'll double check the section, but I would interpret this to be anytime there is a new plan, because not all municipalities have one, or there's an update to one, it would then be required to comply with this section at that point in time. Now, if there's a plan that needs to be amended or readopted soon in the next year, this may be a lot of work. A municipality may say we may not have the capacity to gather and incorporate all of this information by the time our next plan update is required to be adopted. So you may want to contemplate that for future effective date signaling to municipalities, this may go into effect, 2 years from now, so you at least have 2 years, et cetera. That may be something you want to consider.
Yeah, great.
Okay.
So witnesses on this, administration and whoever administration would like to put those.
Yeah, because this is going to,
The plan,
and just to
obviously.
jump into the language, this would be for municipalities that are adopting municipal plans would be
Right.
required to, and just in the sub A there, include an analysis of regulatory and fiscal constraints preventing the municipality from developing sufficient housing to meet the regional housing targets that are developed. And when you get into the subdivisions here, 1 on the bottom of this page, and moving into pages 2 and 3, there's quite a lot of information and analysis that a municipality would be required to do, the level of burden on them, defer to other witnesses to come and speak to that. But
So I would just off the cuff, have DHCD, VLCT and the RPCs in, and then we can figure out more to go from there. Application.
I just started raising this concern, but there are towns, even in Chittenden County, that have very small targets. And at some level, I want to make sure affordability is part of the construct, because if they can build 7 luxury housing units to meet their target, which
Yeah, not acceptable.
they're even balking at that in some parts of Chittenden County.
Yeah.
Then that is still a concern for me. I just don't want them to, when they have very low targets, they could get away with
Right.
things that really don't help us truly meet our goals.
And that meshes with the mapping work that is expected at the end of this year. I mean, that also kind of interplays with the housing targets that are
Charlie-
being set
yes.
by the.
Charlie Baker could speak to this, but
So I think this is slightly separate from that,
well,
and because I think this is ongoing, more information and.
I would only say he can speak to it because there are communities balking at between 7 and 15 units. And they've given them a range. I don't know if every RPC has given them a range, each community.
Yeah.
But if they can stick with the very low end of the range and do 7 large acre single family homes, that's not necessarily our intention. And I'd like to take a better right at that.
Okay, so I think we have a good sense of section 1, and who we can begin to ask and go forward with. Everybody okay with including it for further discussion? Okay, great. Section 2.
I would just say on page 2, paragraph B, line 5 and 6, I would just, after potential redevelopment sites, just make a period and strike available to meet jurisdictions needed housing types, because what's available and what's not available is kind of subjective. We just want them to categorize what's available, period.
so just to jump in here, as part of that analysis, the municipality is required, I just pulled it up on the screen to that specific section, to list an inventory of sites, including zone, unzoned, vacant, underutilized, and potential redevelopment sites available to meet the jurisdiction's needed housing types that they've identified. So Senator, you're proposing end it at
Put a period after
Inventory.
sites and strike the available to meet the.
But to go to Keisha's concern, we're hoping that.
It's a little subjective.
Yeah.
So, is a vacant, underutilized, is it really available? I mean,
Yeah.
it just gets into the nuance of what's in that category. Or do they falsely exclude units because they know that they can't reach them? They can't affect them.
So I've got this note to consider striking it, and just before we do, ask the administration what they meant by it and how, because we could also clarify. Okay, section 2, tax credit.
Section 2, which is going to begin on the bottom of page 3. These are tax credits for the Vermont Finance Agency, Vermont Housing Finance Agency. The real change in the language is going to be all the way down to the top of page 5. So the language on 4 is just clarifying for you all, so you have the language in front of you, what the housing tax credits that we're talking about, the down payment assistance program.
Right.
And then when you get to the top of page 5, currently, VHFA has the authority to issue these credits through fiscal year 2026, and this language would extend that through 2031.
And we heard more on this, and I assume that there'll be more conversation on this, but I assume I would want to keep this in for a moment.
Okay.
There is also, just to remind you, and when we get to it, when we have back, there is a request to increase it to 350. On line 2, there's a request to increase that to 350. Which we'll discuss when they come back. Okay, the offsite construction accelerator, section 3.
So this language came from a separate bill that has been introduced. It is slightly different language, but this would have the Agency of Commerce and Community Development to develop a pilot demonstration project working with a municipality that would look at things like bulk purchasing, streamlining regulatory processes, etc., using offsite construction. My understanding is, I believe the agency was asking for $6 million in order to do this
They were
pilot. That
intended
money is
to
not in
that
here.
6 million. I don't think it made it into the budget.
So there may be something you want to discuss with them.
We will.
Currently,
I
it's
have it.
listed as they shall do this, and there's no money attached to it.
Right. The shall and the budget final piece, seem to have lost their way. So we will, are people okay with including this to go forward? The offsite construction piece, pilot, it's a pilot that they're proposing. I'm happy to hear why they want to do this and
Yeah.
how they're gonna do it with no money at the moment. Or
Oh,
they're
okay.
asking us to include money.
Great. That's, I guess my concern is, are we taking money away from elsewhere? Because I will just say, my biggest concern is that we tend to know how to make manufactured housing affordable. It's the siting and the acreage that ends up costing a prohibitive amount for someone to then find it an affordable solution. So it's not the modular housing, it's the
Well, yeah, exactly.
the land requirements.
To go back to David's piece about Woodstock. Yes, I think so. But I am happy to have the administration come in and chat further about this and whoever else they're proposing this pilot with.
And maybe the treasurer has an idea for the funding. But again, I still wonder about next best alternative.
Yep. Yep, okay. David,
Is the concept of bulk purchasing and statewide procurement, is the idea that the program pays for itself and that the state buys and then the municipalities or whomever pay back that price? Is it a zero-sum game or is it?
good question. I think we need to ask a proposer of this, of this. That's a good question. And how long is the pilot? It's not clear to me. 28, that's 2 years. That's not maybe quite enough time, but anyway, there's a lot in here to discuss.
You may want to hear from the treasurer's office.
Yep, I've got the treasurer and DHCD listed. Anybody else and VLCP, obviously, because a pilot is required and step forward.
This similar language is included in a bill on the House side, and it also includes some changes to language that the treasurer's office administers, and that's why.
So, before we move to section 4, would this be an appropriate place to add the administration proposal about the home designs?
I would potentially put that later in the bill,
Okay, great.
closer to where it would probably fit better in the municipal zoning pieces towards the end of the bill, that element.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, great.
Okay, these next few sections are all related to common interest communities. And so if you recall our conversation from last week, when you're looking at section 5, which begins at the bottom of page 7, you have two.
So these are from Acacia's bill, and I
Yes,
will
ma'am.
add, hopefully we will have a piece from Megan Sullivan about HOAs. We're working on slimming that down. I assume
Yep.
you and she have been in touch.
I have not spoken with her yet, but we'll
Okay.
be in touch.
And Megan, I'm sure, is listening. So we're hoping to include that, Megan.
So this is, when you're looking at section 5, starting on page 7. The first piece is leasing units, and if you all recall our conversation, this would prohibit a common interest community from
Can
restricting.
you just
the
remind
use-
us what common interest communities are? They're condos, they're home ownership
Essentially,
associations, they're mobile
Yeah.
home parks.
Could be,
They
not all
are,
of them.
not all of them, they are. Do they have to be owned? Does there have to be an aspect of ownership or could they be rental apartment buildings?
No, it wouldn't be a rental. There would be an aspect of home
Okay.
ownership here.
So it's,
But it's when you all typically think of or hear about a homeowners association, it's a common interest community. That's the legal term. So Title 27A is the Uniform Common Interest Ownership Act, and it governs the establishment of all common interest communities. And there, as you described, Madam Chair, when you think about condos, condo associations, when you think about homeownership associations, those types of entities.
and mobile home parks if they're owned.
It could be a mobile home park.
Yeah.
But a mobile home park that is owned by one individual as landlord
No,
would not be a.
that's not a common, but we now have so many that, okay, and so this prohibits them from,
So it would, those entities would not be able to prohibit or unreasonably, this is the top of page 8, line 1 and 2. They wouldn't be able to prohibit or unreasonably restrict a unit owner from leasing the individual unit owner's unit for residential purposes. So
Right, and no short-term.
individuals it could not be a short-term rentals. Further down the page, it specifically says in subsections 3 and 4 that it does not limit, the prohibition on transient occupancies like hotels, or short-term rentals. So a homeowners association could still prohibit short-term rentals. They wouldn't be able to restrict a unit owner from subleasing their unit to someone on a more longer-term basis.
so a legislator, let's say, who, if there was a homeownership association here in Montpelier and they went to Florida for the winter for 3 months, they could still rent their unit to a legislator for 3 months.
That is a good question. I don't see anything in this language that would prohibit that, but I will clarify, it doesn't specify any timeframes. It just says you can prohibit them from leasing it for residential purposes, and it can't be a transient occupancy like a hotel, and it can't be a short-term rental. Outside of that, it's not defined. So it doesn't say it must be for a period of time like 4 months,
So those
5
are-
months, 6 months, et cetera.
Okay.
So is anyone available to explain the problem we're solving here? It's just in a nutshell. Is this,
This is Keisha's bill, so why don't we put a question mark at that when she comes back and then we'll ask her. But I think I thought it was getting at was not was trying to get rid of the limits that common interest communities have often on childcare. Here she comes.
That's the second half.
That's the second half. So the second half of Keisha's bill piece here, it is not limiting childcare centers, but here we're just on the residential
Mhm.
units. Can
Yeah.
you explain why David asked? Ask
Mhm.
again.
We're talking about leasing, so it doesn't.
so section 5, first part, what problem are we trying to solve?
So I was at a housing, groundbreaking or something. And, I often rely on people who are in HOAs to tell me, what barriers to housing they face. There are HOAs that will essentially say only X% of units in the HOA can be rented out at a time to long-term renters. We don't have any other similar area of law that restricts long-term renters from accessing housing. So this follows our current definition of long-term housing. It's not saying you can have a bunch of short-term rentals. But I don't think in a time when renters particularly are cost burdened to above 50% of their income, we should allow restrictions on long-term renters accessing housing. We have a lot of HOAs in our district, so we tend to hear more about this. I heard from someone in Addison County, but they commute from Chittenden County because we have a lot of housing. But the more HOAs are allowed to restrict it going forward, I think the more of a problem we're going to see.
So does this, because I can see how an HOA would, and we'll discuss this obviously in greater depth, but I assume that an HOA would not want investors just buying up units and then leasing them to people to rent all the time. Are you trying to enable that, or are you trying to say if they're away on sabbatical, they could rent their unit for a year? Because I think it's
Yeah.
slightly different with an I could see how an HOA would not want to have an absentee landlord who's
Okay.
just renting it for income.
Well, I mean,
for an
they have lots of other mechanisms. I mean, they would have, that has to be consideration right now.
Yeah.
Right? And it may or may not be. I mean, there are places that might have investors, like ski condos, et cetera. So I think that could end up all of a sudden changing the commercial code, which I'm not trying to do. What I'm trying to do is say any long-term renter should not be restricted from living somewhere in the state.
Okay, I think we just need to discuss with, I mean, I think the
Mhm.
section could keep including,
Mm-hmm.
to keep included and to have that conversation with, we must have a rep from HOAs. But I think, if the committee's okay with it, I would keep this in, and I think it needs some discussion because there are certainly a number of common interest communities where how they manage the use of their units is important for us to both more fully understand and hopefully enable for fuller use if it's appropriate.
If we want, we might also hear from the Human Rights Commission or others, because there are huge disparities in the state between who's a homeowner and who's a renter. And saying you can't be a renter and live here has a discriminatory impact.
Right. But let's, I don't think, anyway, it's okay, Thomas.
So the question I have on this, and I am not judging the validity or not of other limits that an HOA might have, but I'd be curious if this language would override occupancy limits if the HOA has that, or age restricted communities. I hear about those down in Florida where you have to be 55 plus. I don't know if we have those in Vermont, and I'm not saying, I'm just curious if this language would basically negate any of the other restrictions that there might be besides the point of leasing or otherwise.
We do have age restricted housing in Vermont. I don't know that this by itself would negate age restricted housing. I don't believe so. I will do some thinking, some analysis on it and come back to the committee if you continue the conversation on this piece moving forward. What's the first
Occupancy, like number of people.
And no, I don't, if I remember, we had something in here about it doesn't necessarily negate any other zoning or land use requirements, et cetera.
Right.
So I don't see any health
Right.
health code related to occupancy.
And
It's
just,
be impacted.
you may remember, Tom, but 3 years ago in the Home Act, we struck down the no more than 4 unrelated rule that places like Burlington had as discriminatory.
Okay, I'm given our time. I think this requires obviously some discussion. So we'll work on witness list for this. Okay.
Subsection B in page 8 and page 9 is the second half of this section where it would adding a similar requirement that these entities would not be able to prohibit operating a family child care home within the unit owner's unit.
But their good zoning rules still apply. So if there's some parking or access.
So it says that in the sub 2 there on page 9, sorry, let me get there. A family child care home operating within a common interest community shall comply with the applicable federal and state laws relating to regulation of family child care. So if there are specific other regulations that a family child care home is required to comply with, this individual who wants to operate out of
No, they'd
their
have to comply
unit
with
would have to be able to demonstrate that.
The HOA commercial.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes,
The-
David.
What do you mean the HOA could restrict it?
This would
At the
prevent the HOA from just blanket.
Yeah,
saying no to
which
the
happened.
Which has happened evidently in your district, Dan.
Yeah, so having some experience living near daycare centers and friends living near daycare centers, this is a bit of an ask for owners of community, HOA and such, which, bought, knowing there's a certain environment, the expectation that environment will continue. Daycare centers, completely different animal.
Okay, a daycare center is different than an in-home childcare. I think in-home childcares are limited to like 6 kids maximum. So this is not a daycare center,
Okay.
So this is in-home care,
and we can talk about it in a
and we'll find out all the rules around in-home care versus a daycare center.
And I will say the situation that where the person had to end their in-home childcare was people did not know because of traffic or other noise or disturbances. When they found out that's what was happening, they said our HOA prohibits that, and they had to find other placements for these children.
Okay, so more to follow on this, and we'll get a witness list of this particular for us.
Do you want me to
No,
see if
we're-
the family that faces?
Yeah, we absolutely, let's get them, but also let's get the in-home care person at, AHS, whoever, we'll figure that out. Okay, so moving along.
Worried a little about what we put into the law that restricts people's ability to use property that they own. Whether or not there's been any litigation that's meaningful here about, in effect, undue restrictiveness of property use.
I think I noted this last week, but there's 2 other HOA related bills floating out there. I imagine if the HOAs don't already have someone, they're gonna get somebody to talk to us about this, but this comes up in a lot of states as HOAs develop. And we heard from Megan Sullivan, right, who lives in an HOA.
And we're asking her to continue work on her proposal with CAM.
Yeah.
So that I would think would be added after these sections.
It is, I will make a brief comment before I jump into section 7. It is a question that you all will need to address as you continue the discussion of whether you want these provisions to apply retroactively to homeowners associations that already exist, or whether you're wanting it to apply prospectively to just homeowners associations that are created after the effective date or that are amended, they amend their bylaws to then come into compliance afterwards. There are some constitutional concerns. If you want to apply retroactively, it's not to say that you can't in any instance, it's just some things that you all need to be aware of.
So before we get to, before we get to section 7, we have section 6, which is the EV charging.
Well, section 6 is the retroactive application of this next section. So that's where I'm just putting a plug in. Both of them currently, as it's in this draft, apply retroactively. And so that's where I'm just saying we'll need to have a conversation about some constitutional concerns there if you want to keep those in. When you move to section 7, that's where you have another provision going into the common interest communities section, which would limit them from being able to prohibit individuals from charging or installing these electric vehicle charging supply equipment.
Got it. Sorry, I jumped the gun on.
No, that's good. You were spot on with where I was at.
Okay.
So
Great. So the possible inclusion here is the Megan Sullivan piece, which we there. Okay. Before we get to the EV.
May I ask a question, Madam Chair?
Yeah, Thomas, sorry.
So as we get it more into the HOA law, question I'll have for you, and I don't know if you have it today, but it seems like and I've seen reports and so on, the HOAs are somehow when some determination unwieldy in their scope of what they can apply. So I've heard arguments for that. In Vermont, do they have by default the rights to restrict anything that we don't tell them they can't? Or is it more that we have some statute out there which says HOAs can regulate on this, and this, and only that? Does that make sense, my question?
yes, it does. And I think it's going to depend on which aspects you're talking. What I mean by that is Title 27A is pretty extensive on the governance of homeownership associations, common interest communities.
Yeah.
So a lot more restrictive on things like organization, organizational structure, voting, etc. And you would not be able to be contrary to certain provisions in there. But like as a general point, these types of conversations, very open-ended on what an HOA can restrict and not restrict. These are entities that have been set up to agree essentially via contract that this is how this community is going to operate. And the state isn't going to come in and say, you can't do this or you can't do that in a prescriptive manner, as long as it's not discriminatory, right?
Well,
You
we
have-
had to pass that last one.
You have other provisions, so they wouldn't be able to come in and say, we're going to restrict based on some sort of protected class or things like that, but provisions like this,
Just think of Dillon versus home rule in a way that has different context. I'm wondering if other states have taken a different approach where they define the scope that HOAs can focus on and then limit it.
To Randy's point, there is a whole body of case law around this. I can give you my local government law book. I mean, is this can apply to like cults and, you know, work, employer owned housing, like there's been a lot of case law. I would say a lot in Florida.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if we want to talk about this, we need an
Or
expert
like
from Florida, or
Florida.
Arizona, or.
Yeah,
so it is, just one more comment, it is a uniform law. I don't know how many states have adopted it to date, I can get that information for you. But it does not take the approach in when we're talking about these types of restrictions, it doesn't take the approach to say, here are the only things that you can restrict. It would be the opposite. It would take, here are the things that you cannot restrict, or in operation of certain things, here's what you must comply with. And then outside of that, you know, it's kind of a right of individuals to, you know, what's the word I want to use, you know, congregate with like individuals so they can set the restrictions of what they want to govern their community by. And the state hasn't come in this instance and said,
As long as it's non-discriminatory.
yeah, that was so what,
Okay,
5 years ago, we ended covenants and
Yes,
did it
we did.
retroactively
Jen Holler, I can remember Jen.
for discrimination against Black and Jewish.
Right.
and I'd be happy to come in and talk more in detail about Title 27.
This needs further conflict.
Yes.
Okay, EV, everybody okay with including the EV? For condos, this is the piece that would say if you own a condo and you own your parking space, you could put in at your own cost an EV charging.
It does some
As
other.
long as it's
other
costly,
pieces of it.
Yeah, I'm in favor, but I just would like to hear an HOA. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
see if they have a calendar. Yeah.
Anybody else we can also add, so.
Section 8, page 14, which just incorporates S34 related to mobile home lot rent increases. As a reminder, this would put a hard cap on the ability to increase lot rents above 1% plus CPI. Currently, if you go above 1% plus CPI, there's a mediation factor that goes into play. This would cap at 1% plus CPI.
Right. And the mobile home communities in my neck of the woods, 2 of them have asked for this. And there may be some middle ground we can find here. They have just, all that has to happen is it goes to mediation. We can walk through this again. Inevitably, the rent gets hiked considerably more than most of them on stable incomes can afford to pay.
So Madam Chair, you said, your constituents asked this, were they the
Yes.
park owners or the park tenants?
Park tenants. But obviously we get park owners in, we get the person at DHCP who runs this program and to chat with us about it. But I think we have wanted to enable mobile home parks to be a place where people, it's affordable for people to continue to live. And if the rent hikes are really not predictable or stable in their increase. I mean, there is an allowable increase at the moment. And the question is, how much more than the allowable increase are we wanting, or are we willing to let it go? How much more is unsustainable and unaffordable? I guess. Is
What I don't see is that it automatically goes to mediation.
it does, I think.
It doesn't. No, I mean, you're saying they can't charge that amount of rent.
Right, but it already, I think in current law, it goes to mediation.
No, that's if
If it's above
If
the
it's-
1%.
you just have to notify the state if it goes above 1%. It doesn't automatically go to mediation.
Currently, if it's above 1% plus CPI, the mobile home park tenants can protest that increase, at which point, if they do that, then it goes to mediation.
Mhm.
And if they can't agree at mediation, they do have the ability to then take it into court.
And the challenge that and the reason I was asked to do something about this is that getting the tenants together, if they don't have an association, to actually organize to do this in fear of being, losing their spot, that many of them don't do this. David?
I'm just trying to figure out what this really does that isn't already happening. And the second question is who's paying for the mediation? Is it the state?
I don't remember. That's a question for the new Arthur Hamlin. Whoever's the new Arthur Hamlin.
I believe that.
Do you remember who this Arthur Hamlin is? I don't remember.
No.
Yes, we met him and I apologize, but
Yeah, so I'll just write some reservations.
Sure.
I don't understand the logic of the investment.
I don't know, I don't know who pays for
What's up
mediation.
against-
We'll find out.
I saw some trouble.
I think we could spend a lot of time on this and not land in a good place.
We have
And
not,
I
yeah,
don't,
if people don't feel this is worth our,
I have some, I would want to hear from economists about the cost displacement that occurs. When you have a rent increase, that means that anyone who tries to move in can end up paying the balance of that. It means that you could be more likely to have evictions, or, you can try to keep certain folks out or push them out. It leads to a lot of unintended consequences to cap rent this low. And I think we need to start there,
I would, yeah,
which isn't like mobile home law and people I care a lot about who need repairs and support and access to mobile home lots. But
right.
it's like it would be a really big issue to all of a sudden drop in the middle of our table that I don't think philosophically we could just rubber stamp.
I would appreciate our understanding it more fully, because at the moment it's CPI plus 1% is okay.
CPI is very different than the cost of housing increases we've seen, than the cost of improvements we've seen.
I agree, but it is not nothing.
So you wanted CPI in there?
That's law. They are allowed to raise it at the moment, CPI plus 1%.
Or notify?
And then they notify us. We get these emails all the time. When
Right.
mobile home parks
Yeah.
then exceed that 1%. That is what I wanted to have us discuss, because we're also displacing people who can no longer afford to stay in their mobile home parks, because lot rent is now increasing in many cases, above 6% a year. And that's a lot for people on fixed incomes. So that is what this discussion would be about. And then after our discussion, if we decide we do not want to include it, that's a committee decision. David?
Yeah, no, I just reflect on the property tax and the problems we've been having over the past several years, and 6% may be low, and we need to dig into this. No hesitation.
I hear your hesitations. I would appreciate at least our understanding it fully before we give the.
Sure, like an hour, but this could take days.
Yeah, well, we don't have time. We don't have
Right.
days for this.
Exactly.
We have till the end of February. Okay.
An hour.
So more to next, we'll have discussion on it. If we decide after that discussion to boot it, to pull it, we will pull it.
How much time did you allocate for testimony for something like that?
We now have 45 minutes to try and get through this. We'll judge it. We only have 3 hours a day until we start at 8:30. We have 3 hours a day. So we'll do it as quickly as we're able. Just saying. I'm happy to start early.
Can I answer one question that was
Yeah.
asked? Senator Weeks, the department does pay for the fee.
Oh, thank you.
Does now.
It does.
It's a statute.
DHCD pays for the mediation.
And it's on page 15, the bottom of subsection A, department. The department shall pay the reasonable fees for professional mediation services based on a schedule established by the department.
So that's not what's up.
My understanding is, if I recall some testimony last year from the department, I do not believe that it happens frequently.
Swallow it, rent increase, mediating.
Okay,
let's
bringing
keep
us
going.
back, section 9, which is on page 16, Vermont Economic Development Authority. So what this section will do is it will amend the definition of an eligible facility or an eligible project, which can be funded by the Vermont Economic Development Authority. And then when you get to page 17, lines 8 through 12, the proposal would be adding that an eligible facility or an eligible project can include, after consultation with and with deference to the Vermont Housing Finance Agency on applications that are eligible for financing from both the authority and the agency, the Vermont Economic Development Authority could fund multi-unit housing developments of 5 or more units when requested by a financing lender. So it's giving VEDA specific authority to use their funds to help finance the development of multi-unit housing developments.
And those are state funds that VEDA has.
State funds have been provided to VEDA in the past. My understanding now is they use them to invest in projects that they get a return on those investments. And then they use that money to make further
Revolving.
from there. So it's not the state giving them money every year to finance these things. At this point, they have enough of their own
Accumulated
capital.
fairly substantial funds.
Yes.
Patience.
I think our.
Sorry, what?
Nothing. Joan did email at least some of us who had questions about Wi-Fi units, et cetera, and she wanted to start in a particular lane that's more on the commercial side. So I mean, I have no problem with that. I just was wondering.
And she and Maura have discussed this, and I think everyone is supportive. More lending for more housing is a good thing, particularly when the VHA they've got the parameters they have on this. So I would encourage us to keep this section in. Okay, service supported housing.
So this is new language that is based off the report that was done since the last session regarding creating a state plan for service supported housing development. There was a task force or a working group that met. They issued a report. This is a continuation of that task force. What this would do is right here on lines 19 and 20, from the bottom of page 17. It would create this task force to monitor and report annually on the development of housing for individuals who receive Medicaid funded development and disability services. So you had a task force, they met, issued a report. This would essentially be a continuation of that task force. I
To keep it alive,
commented,
basically, within AHS.
and I commented last Friday that you may want to consider that currently the task force has an executive director. The chair is the executive director of the Vermont Development Disabilities Council, but it exists under the Vermont Housing Conservation Board, but it's staffed by the Department of Aging and Independent Living. And so you may want to consider trying to align those.
I think we were
fashion.
definitely going to have to align it, and I think there's been some discussion with Polly and
Council's.
with
It hasn't been.
it. Has
Okay, I just,
I think there's work that needs to be done on this aligning of this very need, but this need is big, ongoing, and needs to be kept in the front of all our service supported housing actually needs to be kept.
I do not disagree, but I hate duplicative groups. And I just don't know if I remember last year having a concern that there is a disabilities council. And maybe I was overridden. I don't know how long this council, it wasn't a council when we empowered them.
No, it's not. There is the council. It exists within the Kristen Murphy runs it in
Okay.
AHS. I think
AHS.
in
Okay.
AHS.
So that was the original thing that we said, don't duplicate that.
I don't think we want to duplicate. I think we want to align. I think we want to keep this work going, and I'd love to hear from them about how we can better do that.
But are we creating a new task force?
This would be a new task.
This would be a new, sort of like our oversight, maybe a better word would be an oversight committee. We have plenty of oversight committees in this legislature.
This is the discussion we had last year, but just again.
Mhm.
Okay.
No, it may be.
we empowered the task force to go forward to create recommendations on how we address the huge need for service supported housing for our intellectually developmentally disabled, where we're hitting a huge number of aging parents who can no longer care for these kids. They're no longer kids; they're grown-ups.
No, I just, for the record,
I know.
for everyone listening, I don't disagree with the need for this. I just don't know what their deliverables are. And if we're just asking more people to do work when, I mean, you know, Senator Kitchell and I tried to just put in the budget a few years ago, more money. And you could have a group empowered to direct how it's spent or hear grant proposals, but I just don't like the idea of another group that's going to say to us, we need money and we need help and we need coordination on top of all the other groups that are telling them.
So I would suggest that we have Kristen Murphy come in along with Polly Major and have this discussion with VHCB and the council and the disability council. So I would encourage us to at least figure out how we can align this, how we can simplify it.
I'm
we
all
can
about how to align it without a new task force.
Or, right, I think task force is the wrong word. So the task force implies time limit, and I think this is, and I'm not sure why this isn't already in their purview to keep this concern and oversight going within that, within the Developmental Disabilities Council. I don't understand why we can't do that at the moment, but we will hear from the advocate as to why.
That's the end of my sections.
Okay, let's switch. Thank you. And then the addition of if people are okay with it for introduction, adding, if we can find it in 267, the piece on the housing designs.
I think Ellen maybe.
Alex is big ass. So
Align that with the prefabricated homes. You know.
yeah, I just have to find it.
That would be good.
Yeah, well, oh no, I think that makes the most sense.
Wheelpad would love to have a word. I mean, right? This is exactly what they do. You just also can't get the money that a non-family member does if you house a family member with disability, which I would like to change for ADUs and other types of supportive housing where they have some independence. And that's been a frustration for me, is that we actually bar families from receiving compensation when we would give that compensation to a non-family member. And it's really hard to find a non-family member.
Choices for care should be all over it. And that's why we designed Choices for Care to help finance family members to support family. I mean, to help work for.
We should have an AHS.
Yeah.
And to talk about that, because they still
Choices
don't
for
get
Care
them
is
the
a
same.
great program and has really helped so many people in my neck of the woods help family members care for family members and be able to drop their jobs or their part-time job in order to do that, because it's not a lot of income, but it's some income.
It's not the same amount of income that
No,
people that we.
correct. But it is designed to do exactly that, to keep people out of nursing homes, to keep people cared for at home by family members.
The question is, does it work?
I believe it's working.
What is the difference in pricing that we're talking about?
We will hear it. It's a good question. We'll get the person who runs Choices for Care. I think that section is this section 7 in the H602. Okay. Ellen.
Ellen J. Castillo, the Legislative Council. Cameron, did you have sections at the end of the bill too?
Positions are appropriate.
Okay, so you're, okay.
Yeah.
So the language that I drafted starts at the bottom of page 19, section 11, but the first change in language is on page 20. So this is municipal zoning. So the first piece of language is on page 20 in subdivision B. This is related to mobile homes, modular housing, and prefabricated housing. So under zoning, no bylaw shall have the effect of excluding mobile homes, modular homes, or prefabricated housing from any district that allows year-round residential development in the municipality, except upon the same terms and conditions as conventional housing is excluded. So I included this language. You may want to hear what the issue is as the time frame to be addressed, but currently under law before this change, municipalities cannot exclude mobile homes from the municipality entirely. Usually they would just designate a district where they would be, or multiple districts. This is saying any district that allows residential development shall allow these types of housing.
And mobile homes and manufacturers are different in this case. I mean, they don't have to allow a non-tethered home anywhere. A manufactured house is still a house that is attached to
Right,
it.
it's attached to the ground.
So there's a lot, for better or worse, a lot of different laws come into place that exclude a mobile home. Hence, they are so much cheaper than I don't know what we would call them, ground connected,
Anchored to the ground.
home. I mean, because mobile homes are still anchored to a cement platform, but they can technically be mobile. So a non-mobile home faces all the same restrictions that a conventional
So what you're
home.
trying to do is clarify that a manufactured home is able to be built anywhere where a single family home is, or any,
Exactly.
but not necessarily a mobile home.
They are two different things. A mobile home may almost always be a manufactured home. I would say,
Yes.
maybe someone's doing their own thing, but a manufactured home is not always a mobile home.
Interesting what those definitions really are.
I think Pew Charitable Trust would love to give us some thoughts
So for
on.
example, you have a 1799 home that's moved a mile down the road.
Mhm.
Is that a mobile home then?
At a
No,
mobile moment.
right.
It's,
Well, I mean, that's why I'm just interested what the
Right.
definition is.
Well,
Talking about.
because that would face different regulations on even how it's moved. If it's a non-mobile home, then it has to follow it has to get different permits to be moved.
but it is not a mobile home. It is being
Right.
moved,
So
but it's
A
not,
home that's mobile, but it's not a mobile home.
it's having
It's
a mobile
mobile
home,
temporary.
right? So,
So that's why I'm interested in what the definitions
I
are.
mean, we had a whole task force on the definition.
so
We can call Wendy Harrison in or,
already we allow all these to be built in communities. This is actually the major change occurs not only on lines 8 and 9, but also on lines 21.
We didn't get there yet.
Oh.
That's completely different. Don't talk. So this is requiring the municipality to allow these types of homes where they allow other residential development. I did not find a definition for mobile home in this chapter. If you would like to add to the list of things here or define these terms, you could do that. The next topic.
David,
Well,
much discussion.
based on what you said, I'm resistant to this section.
I know you have a hard time with this section.
So at the bottom of page 20 is the next topic, still in this section. This is about duplexes. So this is language you did add a couple of years ago. This is making a change to that. So line 20, in any district that allows year-round residential development, duplexes shall be a permitted use with dimensional standards that are not more restrictive than what is required for single-family homes. So as you passed initially, it said an allowed use, which does allow means the municipality can apply a conditional use review to duplexes. Changing it here meaning that it needs to go through the same type of review that single family homes do, which is the non-conditional use review.
this is a clarification of something we've tried to do since the Home Act.
This makes it by right. Is that correct?
So you say.
So would you like to, is this a good moment for you to talk a bit about what we understand as by right and what is actually by right?
Sure. So,
Because that was my understanding of that this moves it from allowable to
Permitted.
permitted,
yes,
which is basically,
which has been referred to as by right. That does not mean, that means it needs to go through the same type of review that single family units go through.
Right.
It is a lower level, a more streamlined level of review than a conditional use review involves. It is generally just the application is submitted to the zoning administrator and they review that it conforms to the other requirements, largely dimensional requirements.
right, that all the other requirements,
Right. But we've said, I mean, every time I've gone out to talk about the Home Act, like local electeds or appointed officials, I've said the intent of the legislature was to ensure you were thinking about this as if you would allow a single family home and what process that would go through, you would allow for this.
So it's not that this doesn't go through any process. This still goes through the review that any other house
But
or
they
housing
cannot
unit would.
discriminate based on it being multi-family.
Right.
Correct, and it's a more streamlined review. It is largely a quicker turnaround because it is, it goes to the zoning administrator as opposed to the development review board or however they have called their
Right.
board of review. So, and it can be issued fairly quickly. It does not mean, however, that the zoning administrator may not deny the application because they still have to conform to what the standards are applicable to the single family homes
So it still must conform to the town
requirements. Yeah, so
housing requirements.
setbacks, lot coverage, lot size or coverage percentage, making sure there's road frontage. So that's mostly what is included in there.
I will give you an
Parking,
example
maybe.
from when Corey and I first started working on this. Burlington would not allow duplexing for anything that was on a lot that was less than 10,000 square feet. It was entirely discriminatory. There's no reason to say that if you can't fit a single family home on that size lot, you can't fit a duplex.
So the distinction here is that this is permitted. It allows the town to still review it and see if it conforms to all the town's needs and requirements. It is not what you would call by right. And if you kind of need to differentiate what by right is legally and how we're using it as a term.
Well, I think you did just explain. I just wanted to be clear that it doesn't mean they don't have to make their application.
They could just block something down.
Yes, they still have to submit their application to the zoning administrator. It doesn't mean they have an absolute right with no permit.
They have to have a fire safety
Yeah.
inspection, like they have to meet all of
Right,
our standards of
yes,
habitability.
Yes.
So David, does this go a little bit to allay some of your?
Duplexes.
Hmm?
Duplexes.
Yes. That's what we're talking about.
Just-
Yes.
Yeah, I'm okay with.
Yeah.
More density.
Yeah,
It can be.
yeah, being a big
Oh,
down.
and you are good with that. I thought you were saying, okay. We live to fight another day.
No, I think you're aligned on this one.
So, on the top of page 21 is a related but separate topic. So still in the same subdivision, which was also part of the language you passed a couple of years ago. This is about the multi-unit up to 4 units. So you added this language starting on page 21, line 2 and 3. In any district served by municipal sewer and water infrastructure, remember that phrase, that allows residential development. Multi-unit dwellings with 4 or fewer units shall be a permitted use on the same size lot as a single-family dwelling. So again, by right, as in multifamily up to 4 units, if they're in a water and sewer area, goes to the zoning permit administrator. But there's also this caveat which has been struck. So if the caveat was added that unless the district specifically requires multi-unit structures that have more than 4 dwelling units. So in some towns where they have sewer and water, they have specifically required that in order to build a multi-unit structure, it needs to have 10 or more units or 12 or more units, not the small 4 or fewer units. So that has allowed towns to deny 4 or fewer units. This was a proposal that was not in Senator Rockinsdale's bill or the administration bill. So,
Did it come from you?
yes, in discuss, yeah, the chair and I had discussed issues related that had come up. So,
But it's still. So one of the things we have turned over and over since the Home Act is, well, we've turned a couple things over related to the section. You know, that some communities wanted to say if it was 0.25 acres this, or if it was 0.75 acres this, and you know, you can do a lot on less than half an acre. So we have not wanted to further limit the 4-unit allowance anywhere a single family, because the same would apply to a single family home. They don't want it to sort of be crowding out the lot or crowding out other people, but you can still get a number of units out of that, out of a traditional single family home in a lot of places. That happens. Every major city that has historic homes that have quarters for other people, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't think we want to say there's some amount less than 4 units. We want to make sure that 4 units is the floor.
Is the floor and then above it.
But I haven't had a chance to look at this to see if it somehow lets them say where they had allowed more units, no, you can only have 4 or 5 or 6.
No, I think it's still,
no, with this, I think had the opposite effect, which is in an area where normally up to 4 units would be allowed, a town is allowed to say, no, not the smaller development. We only want to put in buildings here that have 10 or more units. And so
That stops development in some cases.
potentially,
yes,
yeah.
what I'm trying to do is
Yeah.
greenlight more development.
As long as it has that effect. I want to make sure some town
Here-
managers don't get that.
That's the objective.
Yeah.
Okay,
And I will say, we have tried our best to separate this in people's minds from green space. You have a certain number of acres, and we're saying you cannot mandate less than 5 units per acre.
right.
That has always been conflated. I think we artfully pulled it apart last year. But what we're trying to accomplish with this section is infill development where there are, you know, not existing cleanly divided up parcels that may be less than an acre.
Okay, let's keep going.
So on page 21, section 12. So this is amending the definition of served by municipal sewer and water
And this is
infrastructure.
application.
Yes.
Just because we won't remember
Yes.
where things are from.
And so as we just saw in the last section, there are a few references in the zoning sections where you are requiring the municipality to allow denser development if the area is served by municipal water and sewer infrastructure. And so you came up with this definition, which is long. It's a quite long definition, and it gives the municipality some authority to determine where these areas are. But this is adding language here to, I guess, provide additional specificity. So it means an area within 1/4 mile of a road with water and sewer lines where there is capacity or capacity is being added imminently to accommodate housing, and then there are 2 other options. The first is an area where residential connections and expansions are available and not prohibited by some state or federal requirements, or an area where the municipality has defined in their bylaws that are served by sewer and water, and there's some things that they can carve out from those categories. So that is all explained on the next 2 pages as an existing definition. But this is seeking to add specificity about a size, and I don't know.
And Keisha, do you want me to speak to this? Because we initially passed
Mhm.
this, basically saying good develop on any road that had water and sewer, but
That
we
can be huge.
we weren't clearer than that. And so would you like to just speak to this? Why we're doing this, why you're proposing?
Sure. I mean, so I believe that when we were discussing this, we were thinking about the very limited 40 square miles of the state that already are served by water and sewer. And those byways, those roads, one would argue that approximately a quarter mile from the road, are prime areas to develop housing. And so that was our intent, was where you have like people, if people want to disagree about our original intent, I'd be happy to hear that. What was debated in some of our communities then is, if you build there, does that allow people to like build behind you now that there's water and sewer there? And so I've tried to make sure that we're not saying now this isn't like every development begets another development. But if the road has water and sewer, you're supposed to be allowed to develop along that road.
Absolutely. And so question for you, which
Yeah.
is, as I read this, I thought a quarter of a mile, that's actually fairly substantial. Is it a quarter of a mile from the center line of the road that has water and sewer running? So it's really an eighth of a mile on either side? Or
I
is-
love that you're asking me this, because that is not what I meant.
I didn't
I
think
meant
so.
a quarter mile
On each
from
side.
the road.
No, but that's just it. It's like, is it from either side of the road? So it's really half a mile from the center of the road. Is that, you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Wow, buried with the road right to the middle.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're looking at a quarter of a mile.
I would do a quarter mile.
Thank you,
Sorry.
Corey, for.
From
I
the
don't
road.
think to do that though.
Right.
I mean, we
But
do a
it's-
lot of things by like the side of the road.
Corey
Like
Park.
100 feet from the road doesn't mean 50 feet. From each
I
side.
just would say, as we have this discussion, because I think this
That would
does.
call into question the entire road rule, if you wanted to have that.
Yes,
conversation.
We're not having that conversation. Nope, we don't. We will have, I think this does further clarify what we meant 2 years ago. And I think just, we need some discussion in VLCT and towns.
I support the general direction and why we're having this discussion.
Yeah.
One question that I have, maybe people in the room might be able to answer, is I don't think all sewer lines are the same. Because there's like pressurized lines, and then there's lines that you
Ah,
can gravity
yes.
feed. So I don't know if there's a qualifier on the type of sewer line that would be applicable to this. But that's where I would ask smarter people than I to shed light on this.
There's no one smart.
We did go all the way around twice. You can do it again this year on what capacity means. So the
Well, it's a big
communities
question.
already have the ability to say, this line doesn't have that capacity. And there's a definition for what that means, or that they are not developing the additional capacity needed. If it's the kind of line that cannot take another sewer hookup, even though we have one for a car wash that apparently could take more housing. Then this is where the question becomes super subjective if people just want to deny housing. Generally, it is not the water sewer people saying this doesn't have the capacity. It's people arguing about
Well,
that.
actually,
subjectively.
In Woodstock, we have sadly just had to go through what is the capacity of both our water and our sewer. So there are capacity.
There are capacity issues. That is not the same as arguing that a particular use, not based on any actual technical information, has the capacity or not.
Right, and capacity can be changed. So, David,
Just a quick question. So the quarter mile, is that congruent with, was it Act 181 chip? Was that the chip? Was chip 1/4 mile? Or was it a half?
I don't think we specified.
We have a
Sure,
lot of
you'll-
different
Or
miles.
Tier 1? I mean, there's something that limits,
Tier 1 A and B.
what's that?
That was like a quarter mile around village center.
It's a quarter, it's for the village, the neighborhood
Yeah.
designation.
Wanted to see if
Yeah.
there was some commonality between all these initiatives.
Would love
This is
that.
Quarter mile.
DHCD has not been as helpful as I wish they could have been. Not Alex Farrell, but others who were supposed to help us with designated areas have not been that helpful, I would say. I don't know if they're coming in to say why they're not being helpful, but
We'll identify the witnesses for this. Let's keep moving.
I just wanted to raise that this, as I just read, this section has 3 ors in it. You may want to consider if those are the proper conjunctions. Is it and or is it or? Just wondering,
Good question.
because then at which point, my question was, how do you know which the municipality has chosen to use? So you may want to consider if that should be clarified.
Okay. I see two ors.
Now I don't know.
I'd like to hear like Paul Connor planners.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, let's keep moving.
On page 23, that's section 13. You saw this language on Friday. This is any residential project that uses union labor may exceed a density bonus in a zoning bylaw by an additional 20%. You've raised questions the last time I was here. I don't have answers.
I think there are probably
may
a
want
number
to
of questions on this. There are also proposals elsewhere to do prevailing wage. And these are obviously not single family homes. These are fairly substantial residential housing units. This is not necessarily single family house, right?
I would just say, I just want density. The
Yeah,
density bonus doesn't really apply to single, I'm talking about the housing policy.
So I'm just trying to allay some people's.
I just want
Barbell, but
density
maybe going-
bonuses for plenty of things, that people want to throw other things in here.
Where did this section come from?
Education.
This was a construct that came from me.
It's labor.
Because,
Labor has
I
requested
mean,
it.
well, I wouldn't say labor has requested this. They would like all housing that receives state funding to be done
Prevailing wage.
with a project labor agreement. That is a debate I'm happy to have in here. This felt like a door to go through about making projects workable and affordable and adding density bonuses where it's the kind of project and housing that we want to see developed. So I had outreach from the apprenticeship center about saying if apprenticeships are available on site, you know, if this project utilizes apprentices, then they could get a density bonus. I just want density bonuses.
Right. Got it. David.
So really supportive of union activities, but in this case, we're all very sensitive about cost drivers for housing. I'd like, I'm lukewarm on this until we hear some testimony. This has a cost neutrality. in it.
That's why it's written as a density bonus. So it's not saying you have to do anything or that I'm saying they wanted
I'd like to know the cost, if there's some kind of cost delta between commercial and union.
I think the unions would love to come in and say, just because you use a union doesn't mean it's more expensive. I think what is the limiting factor right now to what they would like is that there's probably not enough. If this all of a sudden took off, there's not enough union labor to do all the projects.
To do the project. Okay, I'm going to continue. I think this
But
is worthy of a conversation, so let's keep it in and let's
Right.
keep moving.
I just want to point out, I think I wrote this wrong. I think on line 12, it shouldn't say exceed, it should say receive. Feels like bad grammar there on my
You're
part.
absolutely right.
So, sorry about that.
They receive.
Yeah.
Okay, so interim exemption, I was more conservative in drafting this. As we all know, the administration has requested this to be a 3-year till 2030. And for conversation, you know, I think we just, we're in section 14, interim exemption extension. Okay, sorry, are we in section 14?
Sure, it's still, section 14 is what you just explained.
Right, so at the moment, we have our interim exemption vote of extensions to 27. Numbers of us have asked for it to be to 30. I think there are pluses and minuses to extending it for too long. We have asked for this work to be done and finished in 26, and I'm hoping that we will be able to move forward with the
I think
abilities that we have enabled.
I think what is really critical for me to understand is what we said this work to be finished. Because my intention, and I think our
And the
committee's intention
administration's in contention.
was to show that exemptions from Act 250 have not made the sky fall. And I do not believe we intended that municipalities had to take on the entire bureaucratic burden of Act 250 and the appeals that come with that. It was that they would be able to demonstrate that they have the municipal permitting process to supplant Act 250. Period. Otherwise, I want permanent exemptions to Act 250 in this area.
So your statement compounded with the concerns I have about the direction of the LURB in this work. I fully support extending this to
To 30.
30.
It's been on the other proposals are to 30.
This, and I want to challenge something that sometimes is said, that we did this because we have a housing crisis. Even if we build more housing, it increases the cost per unit every time someone appeals, every time someone, makes someone get a new lawyer, and we're seeing this all over the place. They can already appeal the municipal process. There are housing projects in our districts where they have appealed twice to the Supreme Court. We have said exemptions, not everyone gets to, like, we've said non-duplication,
Right.
period. I want permanent exemption. I want us to pass permanent exemption.
Right.
If it's
Okay,
gonna
at
get
the moment,
watered down.
we're not doing permanent.
Okay,
We're doing
well,
20,
then
30.
let's have everybody else
Happy
talk
to
about,
take it to 20, and
these are exemptions.
happy to take it to July 30 for this draft. So let's do that, and then let's keep moving, because we have 5 minutes.
And I need to go up.
So, that brings us to page 26.
We're on page 20, okay, right.
Well, so it's
July, if we just change it to July 30, that, let's, I think we're more in unity on that.
Yeah, so the date change occurs in multiple parts of these pages. On page 26, there's a couple of other changes to the interim exemption. For what will be, so as this is striking the requirement, for, they, up to 50 units are exempt. It's striking that they be located on a tract of land 10 acres or less. These are for village centers or areas that are the urbanized areas of 50,000 residents. And then there's another change. Currently, it's areas of 50,000 residents and within a quarter mile of a transit route. This is at 4. So these are 2 types of areas that would be under this interim exception on page 26. So that's another change in addition to the date.
And transit routes are public, are transit routes that are currently served by public transportation.
Yes.
But I know that people have concerned about that. Okay, go.
On page 27, section 16, first, this is tier 1B. This is making tier 1B an opt-out instead of an opt-in. Currently, for the 1B process, the Regional Planning Commission discusses with the municipality if they would like to opt in to have any of their areas designated as 1B. This is changing that to an opt-out, and they have to provide a resolution passed by the municipality to opt out.
As I reviewed this with the chair of Senate Natural Resources, she very much wants to review this. I asked her if we could at least take a stab at it, even though it's really, this is a joint jurisdiction thing. So we'll take a stab at this, and then it will go to SNRE probably as a result. So I think we just all have to be aware that if we keep this section in, it will go to SNRE.
It's better than not in conversation.
I don't disagree, Dave.
Just like in the testimony phase here for the League of the Towns.
Oh, yeah.
And the town.
I've already asked them. They're coming in Friday. I've also asked for them to, so the exemptions are working. Well, where and how? So I think we need examples of how the exemptions are working so that we can really understand what they are. And we also need to understand, I've also had the league to testify about what are the barriers of taking on the Act 250 permits from the past. So, yeah.
So the
So
last,
they're going to talk about
What that should mean to us, I believe, is like legacy conditions, I understand.
and then having them
But-
enforce them.
Then deduplicating permits and appeals that would otherwise have gone through both. There is no need for them to say, okay, we're now doing the municipal DRB part And then we're gonna do the Act 250 permit part. They should be exempt from new conditions under Act 250.
Yeah, no, okay, so we'll continue this conversation. And then we're gonna get Paul Connor in on this as well, I think we have. And
Section 17 is tier 1A. It's adding reference to the types of staff. Section 18 is also part of the interim exemptions. I'm going to leave this section so it's part of section 15, just to be clear. It's again striking reference to the construction being on 10 acres or less.
right,
Sorry.
okay, and the rest we will take up. Is it just given our timeline, is it possible to do
I'll do
a new draft and from what we are adding, and also, I'd love to. Okay, let's go off lights. Thank you, everybody. We're pretty much done for the day. And we will be back here tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Thanks.
Is, as